Hello everyone.
About 70% of the friends who watch my videos are not subscribed, and I would be very happy if you did.
I know many of you use these videos to fall asleep, so before you drift off, I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Story 1. The airport was crowded that day, bustling with the usual mix of hurried travelers and anxious families. I was waiting near my gate, my phone battery dangerously low. Searching through my bag, I found my charger and noticed a man nearby who looked equally desperate for a power source. Without much thought, I offered to lend him my charger, thinking it was a simple kindness in a hectic place. He smiled gratefully and plugged his phone in. We exchanged small talk about travel plans and destinations, the usual polite conversation strangers share while waiting. He seemed friendly enough, and I felt no reason to suspect anything unusual. As my phone started to charge, I put it down on the bench beside me and kept an eye on the gate announcements. After a while, I decided to check my phone. The screen showed a notification that surprised me. Unfamiliar apps were opening, and files were being transferred. My heart quickened as I realized the man was somehow accessing my phone while it was connected to the charger. The panic set in, but I kept my composure, quietly unplugging the charger and pulling my phone closer. I tried to lock my phone immediately, but the damage was done. Data was copied, contacts were accessed, and private messages were at risk. I looked up to see the man standing nearby, casually packing his things. He caught my gaze and gave a small, knowing smile before walking away. I was left stunned, feeling vulnerable, and violated in a way I had not anticipated. Once on the plane, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had been targeted. My mind raced with questions about what information had been taken and how it might be used. I started changing passwords as soon as I landed, hoping to minimize the damage. The thought of someone having access to my personal life, contacts, and even financial information was terrifying. Back home, I contacted my phone provider and security experts to report the incident. They explained that this kind of data theft was becoming more common and gave me advice on how to protect myself moving forward. It was a hard lesson about trusting strangers, even in moments of kindness. I felt foolish but determined to regain control. Days later, I noticed strange activity on my accounts. Emails were opened, and unfamiliar logins appeared on social media. It was clear the man had copied much more than I initially realized. I alerted my bank and credit card companies, freezing accounts to prevent any fraudulent activity. The process was exhausting and stressful, but necessary. I also contacted the police and filed a report. They took the incident seriously and promised to investigate. I provided them with a description of the man and the details of what had happened. Despite the uncertainty, reporting the crime gave me a sense of agency. I was no longer just a victim. I was fighting back. In the weeks that followed, I learned to be cautious with my devices and data. I invested in security software and enabled two-factor authentication on all important accounts. I no longer charged my phone in public places without supervision and avoided lending chargers to strangers. The incident changed my habits and awareness in ways I never expected. I also reached out to friends and family, warning them about the dangers of sharing chargers or connecting to unknown devices. Their support helped me feel less isolated in the experience. We talked openly about digital security, and I realized how many people had similar stories of being targeted. It was a reminder that this was not just my problem, but a widespread issue. Eventually, I received word from the police that they had identified the man through airport security footage. He was connected to a larger network involved in data theft and cybercrime. The news brought some relief, knowing the person responsible was being pursued. However, it also reinforced how carefully these criminals operated. Despite the breach, I managed to recover most of my data and secure my information. The journey to rebuild my digital life was challenging but rewarding. I became more confident in my ability to protect myself and less fearful of future threats. The incident, though painful, made me stronger. Reflecting on the experience, I understood the balance between kindness and caution. Offering help is important, but so is protecting oneself in a world full of risks. I would never stop being compassionate, but I would always be vigilant. My phone was more than a device. It was a key to my life and privacy. The lesson stayed with me as I continued traveling and navigating new environments. I was more aware of my surroundings and more careful about my digital footprint. The memory of that moment at the airport was a constant reminder to stay alert. But it did not stop me from living fully or trusting others completely. In time, the fear faded, replaced by resilience and knowledge. I shared my story openly to educate others and help them avoid similar situations. My experience became a warning and a guide. I turned a moment of vulnerability into one of empowerment. Now, when I charge my phone in public or meet strangers, I do so with a cautious heart and clear mind. The kindness I showed that day remains part of me, but so does the wisdom I gained. I learned that trust must be balanced with care, especially in a digital age. Looking back, I am grateful that I caught the breach early and took action quickly. The man at the airport may have copied my data, but he did not take my strength or my voice. I reclaimed my privacy and rebuilt my sense of safety, one step at a time. Life is unpredictable, and sometimes small moments have big consequences. I choose to face those moments with awareness and courage. The experience at the airport changed me, but it did not define me. I am more careful now, but I am also stronger. I will never forget that day or the man who took advantage of my kindness. But I will also never stop being kind. I carry the lessons with me, protecting my digital life while opening my heart to the world. This is the balance I have found. In the end, the charger was just a small object, but it became the catalyst for a bigger story about trust, vulnerability, and resilience. I am ready for whatever comes next, knowing I have the strength to protect myself and the wisdom to be cautious. The world is full of challenges, but also full of opportunity. I will navigate it with both open eyes and an open heart. This experience was a harsh reminder, but it was also a turning point. I am ready to move forward, stronger and wiser than before. Story 2. I moved into the neighborhood with a hopeful heart, eager for a fresh start. The house was small but cozy, nestled between tall trees and quiet streets. I was ready to settle in and enjoy some peace after months of restless searching. Meeting new people was part of the plan, but I never imagined that my new neighbor would know so much about me without ever having met. The first time I noticed something strange was a week after moving in. I was checking the mailbox when a voice called out from across the fence. The man introduced himself and greeted me warmly. That was normal enough, but then he said my full name clearly and without hesitation. It caught me off guard because I had not told anyone in the neighborhood my full name yet. I smiled and answered, but inside I was uneasy. How did he know my complete name so quickly? I thought it might be a coincidence or maybe a mutual acquaintance had mentioned me. I asked him casually where he had heard it, but he gave a vague answer about the neighborhood and people talking. Still, the feeling of being watched crept over me. In the following days, I noticed more odd things. I saw him across the street, always keeping an eye on my house. He never came too close, but lingered in places where he could watch without being obvious. It was unsettling, the way he seemed to know my routine without me sharing it. I began to question how much he really knew about me. I tried to brush it off as neighborly interest, but my instincts told me something was wrong. I stopped sharing personal details with others and avoided chatting near windows. Privacy became my silent priority. The man's familiarity with me felt invasive, like a door opening without my permission. One afternoon, I found a small note slipped under my door. It had my full name written neatly, followed by a message about welcoming me to the neighborhood. The handwriting was unfamiliar, and the note seemed friendly at first glance. But the knowledge of my full name and the way it was delivered made me anxious. I decided to confront my neighbor, hoping to clear the air. I asked directly how he knew so much about me. His answer was calm but chilling. He said he had done some research, just like anyone would when someone new moved in. It was the kind of answer that sounded reasonable on the surface but felt like an invasion beneath. After that conversation, I became more vigilant. I installed security cameras around my home and changed my locks. I also started documenting any interactions or suspicious behavior. It was important to have a record in case things escalated. I felt both anger and fear for my privacy being violated and fear about what could happen next. The man continued to appear in the neighborhood, always polite but distant. I noticed he knew small facts about me, where I worked, what I liked, and even details I had never shared outside my closest circle. The sense of being watched tightened like a noose around my daily life. I wondered if I was dealing with something more dangerous than simple curiosity. I confided in a trusted friend about the situation. Talking helped me process the anxiety and fear. My friend suggested involving the authorities, especially if I felt unsafe. After much consideration, I contacted the police and shared my concerns. They took the matter seriously and advised me on steps to protect myself legally and physically. With the police's help, I filed a report and sought advice on restraining orders. They also helped monitor the neighborhood discreetly for any threatening behavior. I began to feel a little more secure knowing the law was on my side. However, the emotional toll was heavy, and I continued therapy to manage the stress. Weeks passed and the strange attention lessened. The neighbors' visits became rare, and the feeling of being watched diminished. It seemed the presence of law enforcement and my precautions had made him think twice. Slowly, I started reclaiming my peace, stepping outside without the weight of fear. One day, a letter arrived addressed to me from the local council. It explained that the neighbor had moved away unexpectedly. The relief was immense. The source of my anxiety was gone. I allowed myself to breathe deeply for the first time in months. The dark cloud that had hung over my new home was lifting. I reflected on the experience and how it had changed me. I was more cautious now, more aware of my privacy and boundaries. But I was also stronger, having faced a hidden threat and survived. The fear that once consumed me became a lesson in vigilance and self-protection. Life returned to normal gradually. I welcomed new neighbors and built genuine friendships. I shared my story to raise awareness about respecting privacy and trusting instincts. People listened and appreciated the cautionary tale. My house once again felt like a safe haven. Now I walk freely in my neighborhood, no longer haunted by the knowledge that someone once knew too much. The past is a closed chapter, and I carry its lessons quietly but firmly. I am in control of my life, my story, and my peace. The experience showed me that even when fear invades, strength and courage can reclaim the day. Story 3. I found the phone lying on the ground just outside the coffee shop I had visited the day before. At first, I thought it was someone's forgotten device, maybe dropped in a rush. The screen was cracked slightly but still lit up when I pressed the power button. What surprised me most was that the wallpaper was a picture of me, smiling in a park I had walked through the previous afternoon. My heart skipped a beat. I wondered how my face could be on a phone I had never seen before. Curiosity got the better of me, so I unlocked the phone. It did not have a passcode, which was unusual. Once inside, I opened the photo gallery and froze. The device was filled with selfies of me, all taken yesterday. Some pictures showed me sitting alone at the coffee shop, others while I was walking down the street, and even a few inside my apartment hallway. Every detail was familiar: the same jacket I wore, the same expressions I made, moments I had not noticed anyone capturing. I felt a chill run down my spine. Who had been following me? How could someone have taken so many pictures without me knowing? I looked around, feeling exposed. The people nearby were oblivious, chatting or scrolling through their own phones. My mind raced with questions. Was this some kind of sick prank or something more sinister? I needed to find out how those photos had been taken and why. I decided to keep the phone with me for the moment, hoping it might offer more clues. I searched through messages and call logs but found nothing. The contacts list was empty, and no recent calls or texts appeared. It seemed like the phone was used solely for taking pictures. I wondered if it had been thrown away intentionally or lost accidentally. The thought that someone had been using it to spy on me was disturbing. I needed help but did not want to involve anyone until I understood more. That night, I barely slept. I kept the phone on the bedside table, staring at the screen as if it would reveal answers. I thought about the moments the photos captured, times when I had felt completely alone but had actually been watched. The privacy I took for granted felt shattered. I kept imagining a stranger lurking nearby, snapping pictures without my knowledge. But it was a violation I could not easily shake. I knew I had to do something but was unsure where to start. The next morning I went to the coffee shop again, hoping to ask if anyone had reported a lost phone. The barista recognized the device immediately and said someone had dropped it outside a few hours ago. She did not know who it belonged to but had left it on the counter for safekeeping. I explained my situation carefully but kept the detail about the photos to myself for now. The staff seemed concerned but did not offer much help. I left feeling more isolated than before. I took the phone to a local electronics repair shop, hoping they could trace the device's previous owner or check for hidden apps. The technician was polite but told me there was little they could do without a passcode or proper authorization. He advised me to report the phone to the police in case it was stolen. I nodded, realizing this was more serious than I had first thought. The photos on the phone could be evidence of harassment or something worse. I felt caught in a nightmare I could not escape. That afternoon I called the police and explained everything. The officer on the line said they would send someone to take a report. When the detective arrived, I showed him the phone and the photos. He listened carefully and promised to investigate. I was grateful but still uneasy. The detective asked if I had any enemies, or if I could think of anyone who might want to spy on me. I could not name anyone. My life was quiet and ordinary, which made this intrusion even more frightening. Over the next few days, the police conducted their investigation. They checked for fingerprints on the phone and tried to identify any clues in the metadata of the images. Meanwhile, I changed my daily routines and increased security around my home. I felt watched every time I stepped outside, unsure if the person who took the photos was still nearby. The anxiety was overwhelming, but I refused to let fear control me. I talked to close friends about what was happening, and their support helped me stay grounded. One evening, while scrolling through the photos again, I noticed something I had missed before. In the background of one selfie taken near the coffee shop, a figure appeared just behind me, partially hidden in the shadows. The person wore a hood and stayed just out of clear view. I zoomed in and enhanced the image, hoping to get a better look. It was still hard to identify them, but the shape and posture seemed familiar. I wondered if it could be someone I knew or a stranger who had been following me. I showed the photo to the detective, who agreed it was a lead worth pursuing. He contacted local surveillance teams to review footage from nearby cameras during the times the photos were taken. The days passed with little news, and the tension grew. Then, finally, the police called me with an update. They had spotted a person matching the figure's description near my apartment complex on the day in question. It was someone who had recently moved into a building a few blocks away. This discovery made me feel both relieved and unsettled. The police arranged for surveillance on the suspect and warned me to remain vigilant. I installed additional security cameras at my home and changed my locks. Each evening, I double-checked the perimeter, always alert for signs of intrusion. I also started keeping a journal of every strange occurrence or unusual person I saw. This process gave me a small sense of control in an otherwise unpredictable situation. But I was determined not to let this experience ruin my life or make me paranoid. After a week of surveillance, the police arrested the suspect. It was someone I had seen around but never thought twice about. When questioned, the person admitted to taking the phone and using it to spy on me. The reasons were murky, mixing obsession and a desire for control. I was shocked to learn that someone had been so close for so long without my knowledge. The invasion of privacy felt deeply personal, but knowing the truth brought some relief. The suspect was charged with stalking and invasion of privacy. The legal proceedings took months, but I remained firm in my resolve to testify and seek justice. During this time, I focused on healing and rebuilding my sense of safety. I joined a support group for victims of harassment, which helped me understand that I was not alone. Sharing my story and hearing others' experiences gave me strength and hope. Slowly, I began to reclaim my life. I took self-defense classes and learned about digital security. I upgraded my phone and computer privacy settings, determined to protect myself in every way possible. Friends and family remained close, offering love and encouragement. The fear that once consumed me faded into cautious confidence. I felt empowered by my actions and the support I had received. One day, months after the ordeal began, I sat in the park where some of the photos were taken. The sun was shining, and the air was fresh. I felt peace in that moment, a sharp contrast to the anxiety I had known. The phone, once a symbol of intrusion, now felt like a reminder of my resilience. I knew I had faced something terrifying and come out stronger. Life had given me a challenge, and I had met it head-on. Looking back, I realized the importance of trusting my instincts and seeking help. The experience taught me that privacy is precious and must be defended. It also showed me the power of community and the law when used to protect individuals. While I hoped never to face something like this again, I knew I was prepared. I carried with me the lessons learned and the courage gained. Now, when I use my phone or walk through the city, I do so with awareness but without fear. I enjoy the moments of solitude and connection alike, knowing that I am in control of my story. The abandoned phone that once frightened me became a turning point in my life. It was a reminder that even in the darkest times we can find strength and light. I am grateful for that journey and the new chapter it opened. Story 4. I was scrolling through an apartment rental website on a quiet Sunday afternoon when something stopped me cold. Among the usual listings for small studios and one-bedroom units was a new entry that caught my eye. The photos showed a bedroom that looked eerily familiar. At first, I thought it was a coincidence, but as I looked closer, every detail matched my own room. The arrangement of the furniture was identical, the same bedspread, the same nightstand with a lamp, even the exact angle of the window blinds. The wall art was the same as mine, a print I had bought from a local gallery. My heart started to pound as I realized the photos were of my bedroom, my private space, shared without my permission. I scrolled back and forth, hoping I had made a mistake, but the images did not lie. I grabbed my phone and called a close friend to describe what I had seen. She suggested I report the listing immediately to the website and the police. I felt violated, like a stranger had broken into my home and taken pictures. But I had not seen any signs of a break-in. How could someone have gotten these photos without me noticing? I checked the listing details carefully. The address was not mine, but the apartment number was suspiciously close. I realized someone might have used my photos to fake a listing for a different unit in the same building. The thought was chilling. Why would anyone do this? Was it a scam? Or something more sinister? I contacted the rental website to report the issue and explained that the photos were my private property. They responded quickly and promised to take down the listing while investigating. The relief was temporary. I still felt exposed and worried. Who had taken these photos, and how did they get access to my bedroom? I contacted the building manager and asked if there had been any recent unauthorized entries. The manager was concerned and said they would review the security footage. I also asked neighbors if they had seen anything unusual, but no one had noticed anything suspicious. The building felt less safe to me now, even though I had never doubted it before. I decided to check every room carefully for any signs of tampering. Nothing seemed out of place, but the feeling of being watched lingered. I changed the locks on the front door and installed a security camera inside my apartment. It felt strange, watching my own space through a screen, but I needed to feel protected. I reached out to the police and filed a report about the fake listing and unauthorized use of my photos. They took the case seriously and began an investigation. I was told they would check surveillance footage from the building and look into possible suspects. The thought that someone close to me might be involved was unsettling. Days passed with no new information. I kept an eye on the rental website but saw no new listings using my photos. The fear began to fade, replaced by a cautious hope. I started to feel a little safer with the security camera in place and the locks changed. Still, I could not shake the feeling that my privacy had been violated in a way that could never fully be repaired. One evening, I received a call from the police. They had identified someone who had accessed my apartment without permission. The suspect was a former tenant who had lost their lease but somehow retained a key. The person had taken photos of my room and tried to use them for a scam listing. The motive was financial, but the invasion was deeply personal. The police warned me to be cautious and offered support for dealing with the emotional impact. They arrested the suspect and charged them with trespassing and identity theft. The relief of knowing who was responsible helped me breathe easier. Justice was being served, but the scars remained. I started therapy to help process the violation of my privacy and regain my sense of security. The therapist helped me understand that my feelings were valid and that recovery would take time. I learned strategies to rebuild trust in my environment and myself. Slowly, I began to feel at home again. I became more careful about my online presence and privacy settings. I spoke with neighbors about sharing information and looking out for one another. Our community grew stronger because we were more aware and protective. I felt less alone in my experience and more empowered. Months later, I decorated my bedroom with new art and rearranged the furniture. I wanted to reclaim my space and make it feel truly mine again. Each change was a small act of healing. The room was no longer just a place where someone had trespassed, but a sanctuary I had rebuilt. Looking back, the incident taught me important lessons about vigilance and boundaries. privacy is fragile and must be guarded carefully. I realized how quickly normalcy can be shattered, but also how resilient a person can be. I chose to focus on strength rather than fear. Now, when I see my bedroom in photographs, it is with pride, not fear. The images no longer represent violation, but recovery. I protect my space fiercely and live with the knowledge that I can overcome even the darkest moments. The experience changed me, but it did not break me. I share my story quietly, hoping others will understand the importance of privacy and security. No one should feel powerless in their own home. I remind myself every day that safety starts with awareness and action. My bedroom is my refuge once again, a place of peace and strength. Story 5. I woke up early one morning and headed to the kitchen for some breakfast. The house was quiet, the usual calm that comes with living alone. I switched on the light and began to prepare for the day, reaching for the flour to bake something simple. As I pulled the container from the cabinet, something caught my eye on the countertop. There, spread across the surface, were distinct handprints pressed into a thin layer of flour. They were clear and unmistakable, as if someone had pressed their hands firmly into the soft powder. My heart skipped a beat. I live alone, and no one else has access to my apartment. I stood frozen for a moment, trying to convince myself it was some trick of the light or an old mess I had forgotten about. But the prints were fresh and unmistakable. The flour had been scattered only recently. I was the only one with a key, and no visitors had come by since yesterday. My mind raced through possibilities. Could I have sleepwalked and touched the flour without remembering? It seemed unlikely, but I tried to consider all options. The thought of an intruder was unsettling. Had someone been inside my home while I was asleep or away? I decided to check the locks on all the doors and windows. Each one was secure and showed no signs of tampering. I had been careful to lock up the night before as usual. The handprints remained a mystery. I wiped them away, trying to shake the uneasy feeling. Throughout the day, I found myself glancing at the kitchen every time I passed by. The idea that someone else might have been there, touching things in my home, made me feel vulnerable. I even called a friend to talk about it, hoping to get some reassurance. They suggested I install cameras or a security system. That evening, I went to the store and bought a few cameras designed for indoor use. I set them up in the kitchen and living area, positioning them to capture any movement. It was strange to turn my home into a monitored space, but I wanted answers. I felt safer knowing I could watch what happened when I was not there. The next morning, I went into the kitchen and saw a fresh dusting of flour on the counter again. This time, no handprints. I looked through the camera footage from the night before. At first, nothing unusual appeared. The house was dark and quiet. No one came in or out. As I fast-forwarded through the video, a sudden movement caught my eye. A faint shadow passed across the kitchen floor just after midnight. It was quick and vague, but enough to suggest someone had been inside. I paused the video and enhanced the image as much as I could. The shape was too blurry to identify, but it seemed humanoid. I felt a chill run down my spine. How had someone gotten in without breaking locks or leaving signs? I rewound the tape and watched again carefully. The shadow moved from the living room toward the kitchen counter. The next morning, I called the police to report a possible break-in. They came quickly, took notes, and examined the locks and windows. They found no forced entry, but agreed the camera footage was suspicious. They advised me to keep the cameras running and to report any new activity immediately. I followed their advice and stayed alert. Over the next few days, the flour appeared on the counter only once or twice. Sometimes there were handprints, other times just a fine dusting. Each time, the cameras recorded the house quietly, but no clear images of a person showed up. I started to feel paranoid, checking every room multiple times a day. I asked neighbors if they had seen anyone strange around the building. No one reported anything unusual. I wondered if I was imagining things or if there was some other explanation. One night I set an alarm on the cameras to alert me to motion. I went to bed early, hoping for a quiet night. At around 2 a.m. the alarm woke me. I grabbed my phone and checked the live feed. The kitchen light was on, and I could see a figure moving slowly. My heart pounded as I watched the shadowed figure approach the counter. It moved cautiously, almost as if it were afraid of being seen. Then, I saw the figure reach out and touch the flour on the surface. The handprints appeared again, fresh and clear. The figure seemed to hesitate and then quickly left the frame. I called the police immediately and stayed on the line while they sent officers to my apartment. They arrived within minutes and found no one inside. The kitchen was as I had left it, except for the new handprints in the flour. The officers searched thoroughly and again found no signs of forced entry. After the officers left, I felt exhausted and scared. Who was coming into my home at night, leaving evidence but never being caught? I considered staying elsewhere but knew that running away would not solve the problem. I needed answers and a way to protect myself. Determined, I set up an additional camera outside the apartment entrance. I wanted to see if someone was waiting or lurking nearby. I also changed all my locks and asked the building manager to check the security system for any vulnerabilities. It was time to take control of the situation. Over the next week, the flour did not appear again. The cameras outside showed no suspicious activity. The nightly visits seemed to have stopped, though I remained cautious. I began to relax slowly, feeling the tension in my body ease bit by bit. One afternoon, while cleaning the kitchen, I noticed something odd near the back door. A small piece of paper was taped under the handle. I picked it up carefully and unfolded it. Written in neat handwriting was a message that simply said, "I am sorry." I looked around, unsure of what to think. Was this from the person who had been entering my home? The apology felt strange, but also somewhat relieving. Maybe someone had been lonely, scared, or in trouble and wanted to reach out without causing harm. I called the police to report the note. They came to collect it as evidence and promised to investigate further. They suggested the possibility that it might be a troubled neighbor or someone close to the building. They reassured me that they would increase patrols in the area. Days passed, and the flower did not return. The strange visit seemed to be over. I began to feel safe again inside my home. The note remained on my kitchen counter, a silent reminder of the mystery and the kindness behind it. I never found out exactly who had come into my apartment or why, but I learned that sometimes people act out of fear or loneliness, not just malice. The handprints in the flower were unsettling, but they led to increased safety and awareness. Living alone can be peaceful but also lonely. This experience reminded me to trust my instincts and to protect my space carefully. It also showed me that reaching out for help is important when something feels wrong. In the end, I was grateful for the support I received from friends and the police. The incident became a story I shared cautiously, warning others to stay alert but also to be compassionate. It was a strange chapter in my life, but one with a hopeful ending. Now, when I bake and spread flour on the counter, I do so with a sense of calm and control. I am no longer afraid of what those handprints might mean. Instead, I see them as a sign that even in strange moments, we can find understanding and safety. I locked the door behind me and smiled softly, knowing my home was my sanctuary again. The mystery of the flower handprints was behind me, and I was ready for whatever came next. Life continued with its usual quiet rhythm, but I was stronger and more aware. This story stayed with me as a lesson in vigilance and kindness. It reminded me that even when things seem strange, there is a way forward. Sometimes the scariest moments lead to the most meaningful growth. If you ever find yourself wondering about unexplained things in your home, remember to trust yourself and seek help. And remember that endings can be good, even after the darkest nights. Story 6. I found the job listing on a quiet Tuesday afternoon when I was scrolling through an online classifieds website. It said they were looking for dog walkers in my neighborhood and promised decent pay for flexible hours. Since I had some free time and liked animals, I thought it would be a perfect way to make extra money. The listing had a phone number, so I called and was invited to come in for an interview the next day. The person on the other end of the line sounded polite but brief. When I arrived at the small office for the interview, I was surprised by how plain and unremarkable it was. It looked like a storage space more than a business. The manager was a middle-aged woman who smiled politely but didn't say much beyond the basics. She handed me a clipboard with some papers to sign and gave me a schedule for dog walking appointments. I asked about the dog's owners and where I might meet them, but she told me not to worry about that and that my job was only to walk the dogs at their assigned locations. On my first day, I was given a set of keys and a map showing several houses scattered around the neighborhood. The instructions were clear. Go to each location, unlock the gate with the key, find the dog, and walk it for at least 30 minutes. I thought it was unusual not to meet any owners or receive any background information about the dogs, but I figured it was a new company and they were still figuring things out. So, I started my rounds with some excitement. The first house was a small, cozy bungalow with a white picket fence. I unlocked the gate and immediately saw a golden retriever waiting by the door, wagging its tail eagerly. The dog seemed healthy and well-fed, and I felt an instant connection. I tried calling out to see if anyone was inside, but there was no answer. I took the leash and we began our walk. The dog seemed happy, but I still wondered where its owner was. At the second house, the same pattern repeated. I opened the gate and found a lively beagle barking at me from the porch. Again, no one answered when I knocked or called out. I walked the dog around the block, enjoying the fresh air and its friendly energy. But as the days went by and I visited more houses, I noticed something strange. None of the dogs ever had anyone home. The yards often looked neglected, but the dogs were clean and appeared well cared for. One afternoon, I stopped by a small park near the neighborhood to take a break. The dogs I had walked that day ran and played around me, clearly comfortable in my presence. I sat on a bench and tried to piece together what I was feeling. Something about the whole setup did not add up. Why would all these dogs have no owners at home? I decided to keep a closer eye on my surroundings. A few days later, I arrived at one of the houses and found the gate slightly open. I paused, feeling uneasy, but went inside anyway. The dog was waiting by the door like usual, but this time the house was empty and silent. I walked through the rooms cautiously, noticing dust on the furniture and peeling wallpaper. It looked like no one had lived there for months. The dog followed me closely, seeming calm but alert. That night, I started researching the addresses on the schedule. To my surprise, many of the homes were listed as vacant or abandoned in public records. Some had been on the market for a long time, while others were marked for demolition. I felt a chill run down my spine. Who was leaving dogs alone in these empty houses? Was this some kind of trap? I called the company to ask for an explanation, but the manager was evasive. She told me not to worry and that everything was above board. Her tone was polite but firm, and she refused to provide any further details. I felt more suspicious than ever and decided to keep a journal of what I saw on each walk. The dogs were all different breeds and sizes, but they seemed strangely well trained and obedient. One morning I found a small notebook left near a tree in the park where I often walked the dogs. Inside were scribbled notes about feeding times, dog behaviors, and what looked like strange symbols. It was clearly written by someone who knew the dogs well. I took it with me and began trying to decode its meaning. It felt like a secret message meant to be discovered. As the weeks passed, I grew closer to the dogs and noticed subtle things about their behavior. Some of them appeared anxious or scared when certain cars drove by. Others seemed to respond to invisible commands or signals I could not see. It was as if they were waiting for someone or something. The whole situation became more surreal with each walk. One afternoon, while walking a large black lab, I heard voices coming from a nearby abandoned warehouse. Curious, I followed the sounds and peered inside through a broken window. I saw several people sitting around tables covered with computer screens and papers. The dogs I walked were there too, each in a separate cage. The people were talking about training them for some kind of mission. I felt like I had stepped into a secret world. I realized then that the dog walking job was a front for something much darker. These dogs were not just pets, they were part of a controlled experiment or operation. The people inside the warehouse seemed to be using the dogs for unknown purposes, and I had been unknowingly helping them by walking and caring for the animals. Fear and anger, mixed inside me. I left quickly and decided to contact the authorities. I gathered all the information I had, including the notebook and photos I took secretly. When I called the local animal control and police, they were skeptical but agreed to investigate after I shared the details. A team was sent to the warehouse the next day. I waited nervously for news. The raid on the warehouse revealed an illegal dog training operation. The authorities found evidence of drug testing and behavioral conditioning on the animals. Many dogs were rescued and taken to shelters. The people running the operation were arrested and charged with animal cruelty and other crimes. The job I had accepted was just a cover for something sinister and inhumane. After the investigation, I was offered counseling and support for what I had experienced. I felt a mix of relief and guilt. Relief that the dogs were safe and the operation shut down. Guilt because I had unknowingly been part of it for weeks. But I also felt proud that I had helped expose the truth. It was a lesson I would never forget. The dogs I walked that summer were eventually adopted by loving families or taken in by rescue organizations. I stayed in touch with some of the shelters and volunteered when I could. Walking dogs remained a passion for me, but I was more careful about the jobs I took afterward. The experience taught me to trust my instincts and never ignore red flags. Life went back to normal slowly, but the memory of those lonely dogs and empty houses stayed with me. I realized how important it is to stand up for those who cannot speak for themselves. The job that began as a simple way to earn money became a journey of discovery and courage. It changed how I saw the world and my place in it. In the end, I learned that not everything is as it seems. Some things hide in plain sight, waiting for someone to uncover them. I was lucky to be that someone, even if it came at a cost. Walking dogs taught me more than just responsibility and patience. It taught me about justice and compassion. I am grateful for the chance to make a difference, no matter how small. Story 7. I started at the company full of hope and determination. It was a mid-sized office building tucked away on a quiet street, surrounded by trees and a small parking lot. On my first day, the manager gave me a quick tour, pointing out the usual places like the break room, restrooms, and meeting rooms. Everything seemed ordinary and well organized. I was eager to learn my role and contribute. The work itself was straightforward, mostly involving data entry and responding to emails. I settled into my routine quickly and began to feel comfortable with the tasks. But one thing caught my attention early on: a mysterious door on the second floor, marked simply as Room B. No one ever mentioned it during orientation or in any meetings. Sometimes I saw a few people glance at it nervously or hurry past without looking. It made me curious. After a few days, I decided to ask about Room B during a break. I approached a colleague I had gotten to know and asked if she knew what was behind the door. She gave me a strange look and said she had never heard of Room B. Thinking it was odd, I then asked another coworker, who shrugged and said it did not exist. The mystery grew. I thought maybe it was a storage room or a maintenance closet, but no one seemed to know. My curiosity got the better of me one afternoon. I went to the HR office to inquire about Room B, thinking they would have answers about the building layout or safety regulations. The HR representative smiled politely but said there was no Room B in the building. She even showed me the floor plan, which only had rooms labeled A, C, D, and so on. I was baffled. How could a door with that sign exist if the room itself did not? Over the next week, I kept trying to find out more. I asked other staff members and even the janitor, but everyone acted like Room B was a made-up story. Some people looked uncomfortable or avoided my questions. I started to feel uneasy. What was the purpose of that door? Why was it there if no one talked about it? One day I decided to be more direct. I emailed my supervisor asking about Room B and its function. The response was curt. He said to focus on my tasks and not to ask about things outside my duties. I was surprised by the tone. It made me think that maybe Room B was something sensitive or secret. I became more determined to find answers. Then things started to change. A few colleagues who had been friendly suddenly stopped responding to my messages. I overheard whispers when I walked by. One day I was called into a meeting with the HR manager and my supervisor. They told me that my recent questions about Room B were causing distractions and concerns among the team. They suggested that I respect company privacy and drop the matter. I tried to explain that I was just trying to understand the workplace better and that my questions were innocent. But they seemed unconvinced. The HR manager warned me that continued inquiries into unauthorized areas could be considered insubordination. I left the meeting feeling anxious and confused. I had never experienced this level of hostility before. A few days later, I was called to the HR office again. This time, the atmosphere was much colder. They told me that due to my behavior and disruption, my employment was being terminated effective immediately. I was stunned. I asked if there was any way to appeal or discuss the decision. They said it was final and handed me a letter. I gathered my belongings and left the building in shock. Outside, I stood by my car, trying to process what had just happened. I had been fired for asking about a room that apparently did not exist. It felt surreal and unfair. I wondered what was behind that door and why no one wanted me to know. The mystery of Room B became an obsession. I could not let it go. In the days that followed, I searched online for information about the building and the company. I found nothing unusual. No reports, no news articles, no hidden secrets. It was as if Room B was erased from existence. I reached out to former employees on social media, but they either ignored me or gave vague answers. I felt isolated and frustrated. Determined to uncover the truth, I visited the building after hours. I waited until the lights were off and the parking lot was empty. I approached the second floor quietly and stood in front of the door marked Room B. It was old, wooden, with a rusty handle. I hesitated for a moment, then turned the knob. To my surprise, it opened. Inside was a small, dimly lit office filled with dusty files, old equipment, and faded photographs. It looked like it had not been used for years. I noticed papers scattered on a desk, some labeled confidential. The air smelled of mildew and forgotten memories. I took pictures with my phone, feeling a mixture of fear and excitement. As I looked through the files, I realized this room held records of employees who had mysteriously disappeared or left the company under strange circumstances. Some names matched those I had heard whispered about in the hallways. The documents suggested a cover-up, something the company did not want anyone to know. I felt chills run down my spine. Suddenly, I heard footsteps approaching. Panic set in, and I quickly closed the door and slipped out the way I came. I ran down the stairs and out of the building without looking back. That night, I could not sleep. My mind raced with questions and fears. What had I stumbled upon? Was I in danger? The next morning, I contacted a journalist who specialized in corporate investigations. I shared the photos and information I had found. The journalist promised to look into it but warned me to be careful. Over the next few weeks, I received anonymous messages warning me to stop digging. I changed my phone number and stayed with friends for a while. The journalist's report finally came out. It exposed a hidden program within the company where employees who became liabilities were quietly removed and erased from records. Room B was the storage place for evidence of this dark practice. The article caused a scandal, leading to government investigations and lawsuits. The company's top executives were forced to resign. I felt a strange sense of justice, but also sadness for those who suffered in silence. My firing was a small price to pay for revealing the truth. I realized that asking questions, even uncomfortable ones, was necessary to uncover lies. The experience changed me. I became more cautious, but also more determined to stand up for what is right. In time, I found a new job at a company that valued transparency and respect. I kept the memories of Room B as a reminder that silence can hide terrible secrets. I learned that curiosity and courage can bring light to dark places. Though my path was difficult, it led me to a stronger version of myself. Looking back, I understand that some doors are closed for a reason, but it is our choice whether to accept that or challenge it. I chose to challenge it. The truth matters. And no matter the cost, I will always ask the questions others fear to speak. Story 8. It was just after 7 p.m. when the phone rang. I was alone in my apartment, winding down from a long day that had tested every bit of patience I had. The ring startled me, since I was not expecting any calls that evening. I hesitated before answering, but curiosity got the better of me. The voice on the other end was unfamiliar, tense and low. "Tell them about the freezer, or we will," the stranger said, before hanging up abruptly. My heart jumped, and cold sweat broke out on my forehead. I sat frozen, holding the phone tightly, trying to make sense of what I had just heard. The word freezer echoed in my mind, but it made no sense. I did not know what freezer they were talking about, or who them was. I tried calling back, but the number was blocked. My mind raced through memories and moments, searching for anything related to a freezer. I had a small freezer in my kitchen, but it was nothing special, just an appliance where I kept frozen meals and ice packs. There was no reason for anyone to threaten me over something like that. Still, the threat felt real, and I could not shake the fear that settled deep in my chest. I spent the rest of the night tossing and turning, unable to sleep. Every shadow seemed suspicious, every sound amplified. I kept thinking about the stranger's words, wondering if it was a prank or something more serious. I considered telling a friend or the police, but I felt unsure how to explain such a vague threat. I wanted answers but did not know where to find them. The next morning I checked my freezer carefully. I opened every drawer and shelf, inspecting the contents for anything unusual. Everything was ordinary. The frozen vegetables, leftover meals, and ice trays all in their usual places. There was no sign of anything suspicious or hidden. The strange call lingered in my mind like a cloud, refusing to dissipate. I decided to call the police non-emergency number to report the threat. The officer who answered was professional but cautious. I explained what had happened and gave them the details of the call. They said they would file a report and suggested I be vigilant. The reassurance helped a little, but I still felt unsettled, unsure what to do next. Days passed with no further contact from the stranger. I hoped it was over, just a cruel prank. Yet the memory of the voice haunted me. I found myself watching my surroundings more closely and locking the doors multiple times before going to bed. Every time the phone rang, my heart skipped a beat. The tension was exhausting. One evening, I received an unexpected visit from a neighbor. They asked if I had heard strange noises coming from my apartment. I had not noticed anything unusual, but their concern made me uneasy. They said other residents had reported odd sounds near the freezer area in the building's basement. That was when I remembered the basement freezer room everyone talked about, but no one used much. The building's freezer was an old walk-in style, used years ago to store large amounts of food for tenants or during events. It had been mostly abandoned for a long time, rarely maintained or checked. The neighbor warned me to be careful if I ever needed to go down there. Suddenly, the stranger's message made a little more sense. The freezer was not just mine, but also a shared part of the building. Curiosity mixed with fear as I decided to investigate the freezer room. I waited until late evening, when the hallways were quiet and most people were asleep. I took a flashlight and key, which I borrowed from the building manager after explaining my concerns. The manager seemed hesitant, but agreed to let me see the freezer. I told myself it was important to face the mystery head-on. The basement was cold and dark, with the air thick from years of neglect. The freezer door was heavy and creaked as I opened it. Inside, the cold air hit me like a blast, and frost covered the walls. The large space was mostly empty except for some crates and old shelves. I scanned the area carefully, shining my flashlight into every corner. Then I sought a small, hidden compartment behind a loose panel in the wall. It was barely noticeable, unless you looked closely. My heart pounded as I knelt down and pulled the panel aside. Inside was a plastic container wrapped in tape, cold to the touch. I hesitated but opened it slowly, revealing an assortment of documents and old photographs. I recognized some of the papers immediately. They were reports and notes related to the building's history and management. The photos showed people I did not know, standing near the freezer, holding strange items. Among them was a picture that made my blood run cold. It was of a person bound and gagged, clearly distressed, inside the freezer room. The image was blurred but unmistakably real. Panic surged through me. I realized the freezer had a dark past, one that someone was desperate to keep hidden. The stranger's threat was a warning to reveal the truth or face consequences. I debated what to do. Should I go to the police with this evidence or try to protect myself by staying silent? That night, I called the police again, this time with the new evidence. They arrived quickly and took the container from me with serious expressions. The officers began an investigation, asking questions about the building, the neighbors, and anyone who might be involved. I cooperated fully, hoping justice would be served. As the investigation unfolded, I learned that the building manager and a few others had been covering up illegal activities related to the freezer. The person in the photograph was a victim of kidnapping and abuse, hidden away for weeks. The discovery shocked the community and brought renewed attention to the building's safety issues. I was relieved to know the truth was finally coming to light. Though the stranger's call was terrifying, it had pushed me to uncover something important. I realized that sometimes threats come with a purpose to force secrets out of the shadows. I felt a mixture of fear and pride for facing the danger and acting on it. The freezer, once a place of silence and cold, became a symbol of courage and change. In the weeks that followed, I felt safer as the police increased patrols and the building implemented new security measures. The neighbors expressed gratitude for my role in exposing the truth. I reconnected with friends and family, sharing the experience and reminding myself I was not alone. The phone never rang again with that chilling message. Looking back, the moment the stranger called me was the turning point. What started as a frightening mystery turned into a journey for justice and healing. I learned to trust my instincts and not ignore the warning signs. The freezer was no longer a secret or a threat, but a chapter closed with hope for a safer future. I keep the plastic container and photographs safely stored, a reminder of how fragile peace can be. I still lock my doors and check my surroundings, but fear no longer controls me. Instead, I carry the strength of knowing that even the darkest threats can lead to light. That call was the beginning of a story I never expected to live, but one I am grateful to have told. Story 9. It started with a simple invitation. We had been talking for a few weeks, mostly online and a few brief meetups in public places. When my date suggested trying a new restaurant, I was intrigued. They said it was a hidden gem, a place not listed on any map or review site. The mystery made me curious, and I agreed without hesitation. On the evening of our date, they picked me up promptly at 7 p.m. The car was clean and smelled faintly of fresh pine. As we drove, I tried to guess the location based on the route, but it took me through unfamiliar streets and quiet neighborhoods. The city lights gradually faded, replaced by stretches of dense trees and winding roads. We pulled up to a small, unmarked building surrounded by tall oaks. There were no signs or lights outside except a faint glow from inside. The entrance was an old wooden door, slightly worn but sturdy. I hesitated for a moment, feeling a strange mix of excitement and apprehension. There was a silence in the woods that made everything feel suspended in time. Inside, the restaurant was nothing like I expected. The space was cozy, with soft candlelight and rustic wooden furniture. The walls were decorated with faded paintings and old photographs. A gentle hum of quiet conversation filled the room. It felt like stepping back in time to a place untouched by the modern world. My date led me to a table near the window. The view showed a dark forest beyond, with shadows dancing in the flickering light. The menu was handwritten on a piece of parchment. There were no fancy descriptions or prices, just simple dishes named after ingredients. It was clear this place valued tradition over trends. We ordered food and talked about our lives, hopes, and fears. The meal was delicious, each bite rich with flavor and care. The chef came out to greet us, an elderly woman with kind eyes and a warm smile. She told us the restaurant had been in her family for generations, hidden away to protect its secrets. Her presence made the whole evening feel even more intimate. As the evening went on, I noticed that none of the other guests seemed like tourists. They were quiet, reserved, and seemed to know each other well. I felt like an outsider, but my date reassured me. They said this place was special, a sanctuary for those who sought something different from the usual dining experience. I wanted to believe that, but something about it still felt surreal. After dinner, we stepped outside, and the cool night air was crisp and fresh. The stars above were brighter than I had ever seen in the city. My date pointed out constellations, sharing stories passed down through their family. The sense of calm and mystery stayed with me, making the night unforgettable. I almost forgot I had no way of finding this place again. When it was time to leave, I asked my date how to find the restaurant again. They smiled and said it was not a place you could simply look up or stumble upon. It was hidden for a reason, meant only for those who were invited. I understood then that this night was a rare gift, not to be shared with just anyone. It felt like I had entered a different world for a brief time. In the following days, I tried to find the restaurant online or ask around, but no one seemed to know about it. Maps showed only empty forests and small roads. I realized that some places are meant to remain mysteries, existing only in moments like this one. The memory of that night stayed vivid in my mind. I could recall every detail like it had just happened. I began sketching the layout of the restaurant from memory. I wrote down everything I could remember about the staff, the furniture, the scent in the air. I even looked into regional land records to see if the building was listed anywhere. Nothing came up, not even a plot number where we had parked. It was like the place had vanished with the night. Weeks passed, and I could not stop thinking about it. I had dreams about the restaurant, some peaceful and some unnerving. In one dream, the chef served me a dish with no name, and everyone in the room turned to watch me eat it. In another, I wandered the woods outside but could never find the door. My mind kept circling back to that night, trying to make sense of it. Eventually, I brought it up again with my date. They laughed softly and said some places are best left unsearched, and they explained it was not meant to be revisited but remembered. But that did not fully satisfy me, but I respected their boundaries. It was hard not to chase a mystery that had changed something inside me. Still, I became obsessed with hidden places. I started visiting old roads, taking long drives into the countryside. I hoped I might catch a glimpse of the building again, even from afar. Every time I found a clearing or an unmarked trail, I stopped to investigate. But nothing ever resembled that night. One afternoon, while walking along a forgotten path, I found an old man sitting on a bench carved from a tree trunk. We talked for a while, and I mentioned the restaurant. His expression changed, and he asked me questions in return. He described the same candlelight, the same parchment menu. He had been there once too, long ago. He told me it had been different then, but the feeling was the same, and that it appeared to him when he needed it most, just like it had for me. He said some people search their whole lives and never find it, while others stumble upon it just once. We sat quietly for a few minutes, sharing the strange understanding that comes from shared wonder. Then he stood and walked off, leaving me alone with my thoughts. The encounter only deepened the mystery. I started writing about it, putting my memories into words. I shared the story online, hoping someone else might have a similar experience. Most responses were skeptical, but a few people sent cryptic replies that felt too familiar to ignore. One message simply read, "I remember the light." I never found the restaurant again, and maybe that is how it was meant to be. But I found something else in the process. I found a sense of curiosity and openness that had been buried beneath routine and logic. I began approaching life with a new sense of wonder, willing to let go of needing to explain everything. It changed how I interacted with people. I listened more closely, looked more carefully. I paid attention to small details, to stories, to feelings. I began to believe that some connections defy reason, that some nights shape you more than years ever could. That restaurant, whether real or imagined, had opened something in me. I no longer chase the location, but I do revisit the feeling. I light a candle sometimes and sit in silence, remembering the warmth and mystery. I make dishes that resemble what we ate that night, though they never taste quite the same. I write in a journal about dreams, encounters, and fleeting beauty. I hold on to that sense of wonder and let it guide me. Occasionally, when I meet someone new, I feel a familiar stillness. I wonder if they too have found the place, or if they are still searching. I have never spoken of it aloud again, not beyond that one story I posted. Some truths feel sacred, and this one belongs to a quiet corner of my heart. It is not loneliness I feel, but a private comfort. Years later, I received a letter with no return address. It contained a photograph of the forest path, and the back simply said, "Still there." I did not recognize the handwriting. My hands trembled slightly as I held the photo. I felt like the mystery was still breathing, watching, waiting. I never tried to return. I knew that if it was meant for me again, it would find me. That was the true magic of the place. Not in how it looked, but in how it found people when they were open to wonder. In a world that often demands certainty, it offered mystery. I carried on with life, but I was never the same. I moved through each day with the quiet knowledge that hidden places exist, that some things are not meant to be mapped or explained, that somewhere, in a forest thick with silence, a light still flickers behind an old wooden door. And one day I might walk that path again. Story 10. The night was deep and quiet when my phone suddenly lit up on the bedside table. The screen showed a message that made my blood run cold. It read, "You've been chosen. Remain still." I sat up immediately, my heart pounding in my chest. The room felt suffocating, like the walls were closing in on me. I checked the sender, but there was no name or number, just a blank line. I tried to call the number back, but it was disconnected. The message seemed impossible to ignore, yet it made no sense. I looked around the dark room, wondering if someone was there watching me. The silence was heavy and unnerving. I lay back down but could not relax. Every noise, every creak of the house made me jump. I kept my phone close, waiting for another message or a clue to what chosen meant. Hours passed like minutes. I finally drifted into a restless sleep, only to wake suddenly at the first light. The next day, I tried to convince myself it was a prank or some glitch in the system. But the feeling of being watched lingered. I noticed shadows moving just beyond my sight and strange noises outside the house. I became hyper-aware of every detail, unable to shake the sense of danger. It was as if the message had marked me for something I could not yet understand. I told a friend about the message, hoping for reassurance. She said it sounded like spam or a weird joke. But her words did not comfort me. I wanted to believe it was nothing, but my instincts screamed otherwise. The idea of being chosen felt heavy with meaning and threat. In the following days, the messages continued. Sometimes they were simple instructions like stay calm or do not look outside. But other times they were more cryptic. Prepare. It begins. Trust no one. Each one deepened my fear and confusion. I stopped answering calls and stopped going outside as much as possible. My phone became both my connection and my prison. The messages came at odd hours, always making me feel like I was being watched. I began to document everything, hoping to find a pattern or a way out. But the more I searched, the more trapped I felt. My world was shrinking to the size of my room. One evening, a new message arrived. The time is near. Remain still. I sat frozen, the words echoing in my mind. I did not know if I should move or stay put, if I should run or hide. Fear wrapped around me like a cold blanket. The unknown was closing in. That night I heard footsteps outside the door. I held my breath, too scared to move or make a sound. The handle rattled gently, then stopped. The silence returned, but I could not relax. My body was tense, waiting for something I could not see. The next morning, I found an envelope slipped under my door. Inside was a small note. You have a choice. Follow the light or remain in the dark. There was no signature, no explanation. The message seemed to offer hope and threat at the same time. I felt like I was caught in a puzzle with no instructions. I tried to tell myself I could ignore the messages, that this was a game or a test. But the reality was different. The messages affected my sleep, my thoughts, my ability to focus. I felt like a puppet on strings, controlled by an unseen force. The idea of being chosen was no longer vague. It was a chain around my neck. Desperate for answers, I began searching online for anything similar. I found stories of people receiving strange messages, of mysterious disappearances, of secret groups recruiting victims. The more I read, the more I feared that I was caught in something much bigger than myself. The messages were not random, they were part of a plan. One night, a final message came. Tonight is the night. Remain still, and you will be free. I was paralyzed with fear and uncertainty. The words promised freedom, but demanded submission. I did not know if it was a trap or a salvation. My mind raced through every possible outcome. As midnight approached, I sat in my dark room, phone in hand, waiting. The silence was broken by a soft knock on the door. I hesitated, then slowly opened it. Standing there was a person dressed in black, face hidden by a hood. They held out a small device that glowed faintly. "This will explain everything," they said quietly. I took the device and pressed the button. A holographic image appeared, showing a world where choices were controlled and freedom was a rare gift. The person explained that I had been selected for a test of obedience and courage. If I remained still and trusted the process, I would be given a new chance at life. The truth was overwhelming, but I felt a strange calm wash over me. I realized that being chosen was not a curse, but an opportunity. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and decided to trust the unknown. The light from the device grew brighter, filling the room with warmth. I was no longer afraid. When I opened my eyes, I was in a new place. It was quiet and peaceful, surrounded by nature and gentle sounds. Others were there too, people who had received similar messages. They welcomed me without words, just a knowing glance. We had all passed the test. There were no fences or guards, just open fields and clear skies. The fear that had consumed me was gone. I felt free, in control, and aware of every breath I took. Each day brought new understanding, new purpose. I no longer questioned the messages, I understood them. They were sent not to frighten, but to guide. The stillness was not about obedience, but clarity. In a world filled with chaos, we had been pulled aside to see something more. We were the control subjects, the observers of truth. And now we could live without fear. The person in black returned once more, this time without the hood. They smiled and said, "You are ready now." I nodded, understanding completely. The test was never about control, but awareness. I had learned to listen, to trust, and to face the unknown. From that point on, I lived with purpose. I shared my story with those who were ready to hear it. Not everyone believed, and that was fine. The truth was not for everyone, but for those who understood, it changed everything. I watched as more people arrived, eyes wide with fear and confusion. I welcomed them, offered comfort, and helped them see. The path was not easy, but it was worth walking. The light that once scared me now gave me strength. The nights were no longer filled with fear. My phone stayed silent, but its memory remained. It had delivered the first sign, the beginning of my journey. I kept it as a reminder of how far I had come. A simple message had turned my world upside down. Now I walk in peace, knowing I was never alone. The test worked. I was the control subject. And I had passed. I remained still, but not in fear. I remained still in purpose. Each day is a gift I never take for granted. I explore the world with open eyes and a calm heart. I no longer fear messages in the night. I welcome them as signs of new beginnings. Life has a rhythm I never noticed before. When the wind moves the trees, I listen. When the sun rises, I smile. I remember the fear and honor it, but I no longer live in its shadow. I was chosen not to be trapped, but to be awakened. And now I am fully alive. I do not know who sent the first message. Maybe it was a person. Maybe it was something else entirely. But I know it found me at the right time. I was ready to listen, even if I did not know it then. If you ever receive a message that stops your heart, do not ignore it. Do not run, but do not rush. Sit still. Breathe. There is power in stillness, more than you can understand until you try it. I often return to the place where it all started. I sit in the quiet and watch the world move around me. And I smile because I know something most do not. I was chosen, not for punishment, but for awakening. And in that awakening, I found the truth. Story 11. The notification popped up while I was still in bed. My phone buzzed with a message from my bank. It simply read, "You have received a payment of $5,000. I sat up, blinking hard at the amount, unsure whether it was a mistake or some sort of scam. Curious and cautious, I opened the banking app and found the transfer already pending in my account. The memo field read, "For keeping quiet." My heart skipped a beat. It was not the kind of message you could brush off or misinterpret. I scrolled through my recent activity, checking if there was any transaction I had made that could explain it. Nothing matched. I had not offered any service, had not sold anything, and certainly had not agreed to keep anything quiet. The more I stared at those words, the more sinister they began to feel. I locked my phone and got out of bed, pacing slowly through the apartment. I lived a quiet, ordinary life. No scandals, no shady side gigs, nothing that would warrant hush money. I had no idea who would send me such a thing, or why. For a moment, I considered reporting it to the bank, but I hesitated. What if it was a test, a trick, or worse, some kind of setup? Would reporting it make me look guilty? Or involved in something I was not even aware of? I decided to wait and see if any other information came through. Maybe it would turn out to be a banking error. Maybe someone else had entered the wrong account number. That seemed like the most rational explanation, even if it did not explain the chilling message. Throughout the day, I found myself checking over my shoulder more than usual. I felt like eyes were on me, even in crowded places. I jumped at normal sounds. The words in that memo kept echoing in my mind. That night, I hardly slept. I kept my phone near me, obsessively refreshing my banking app. The money remained. No reversals, no messages. Nothing but the original deposit and that 6-word memo. I started to feel like I was in the opening scene of a thriller, where something innocent spirals into chaos. In the morning, I received an email. No sender listed, just a string of random letters and numbers. The subject line was blank. The body of the message said, "Do not ask questions. Keep the money." It ended with a period and nothing more. My stomach twisted. This was no banking error. Someone knew me. Someone had targeted me. But for what? What was it they believed I had seen or heard? I tried to remember anything unusual from the past few weeks. Had I witnessed an accident? Overheard a conversation? Caught something on camera without realizing? My memory offered nothing concrete. Just normal, mundane days strung together like beads on a thread. Later that day, I visited the bank in person. I told the teller I had received a payment I did not recognize and asked if there was any way to trace it. She clicked through screens and politely told me it had been sent from an anonymous cryptocurrency exchange and converted through a third-party payment service. Anonymous. Of course it was. My name, however, was fully listed on the receiving end. The transaction had been deliberate, targeted, and carefully shielded from discovery. I left the bank with more questions than answers. That night, as I prepared dinner, I noticed a car idling outside my building. It had been there for some time, engine running, lights off. I watched it from the kitchen window, waiting for it to move. After 15 minutes, it pulled away slowly. I began to wonder if I was truly being watched. If someone was checking to see whether I would talk. If the money was not just hush money, but a warning. A test to see if I could be trusted. I checked every lock in my apartment twice that night. Sleep was broken and shallow. I dreamt of people whispering behind closed doors, of eyes watching me through peepholes. I woke up with the sheets tangled around me like restraints. Days passed. The money remained. No one contacted me again. The car did not return. I wanted to believe it was over, but I could not convince myself of that. Out of desperation, I started documenting everything. The bank message, the email, the car. I wrote it all down and saved copies on a secure drive. If something happened to me, I wanted someone to know the truth. I could not keep this all to myself anymore. I called a close friend and hinted at what was going on, leaving out the money part. I just said I had received something strange and thought someone might be watching me. They offered to stay over, and I accepted without hesitation. That night, I finally slept. Having someone else there, someone breathing in the same room, grounded me. When I woke up, my friend had gone out for coffee. On the table was a folded napkin with a note written on it. "You are not crazy. Trust no one." My hands trembled as I held the note. My friend had seen something. Maybe they had gotten a message too. I called them immediately, but their phone went to voicemail. I texted, asking what the note meant. No response. Hours passed before they called back. They sounded shaken and confused. They swore they had not left any note. They had not even seen the napkin. Their voice was strained, scared, and genuine. I told them everything. The payment, the email, the car. They listened in stunned silence, and then said they believed me. They suggested I go to the authorities. But what would I say? That I got money from someone I could not identify and felt paranoid about it. Instead, I tried to take control. I started reviewing my recent locations, checking where I might have crossed paths with someone dangerous. I checked every device I owned for spyware or malware. Nothing turned up. Then I remembered a conversation I had overheard at a cafe 2 weeks earlier. A man talking loudly on his phone about a deal, something hush-hush and urgent. At the time, I had not paid attention, but I had been sitting close. Maybe I had been recorded on security cameras. Maybe someone assumed I had heard something I should not have. I returned to that cafe and asked the owner if I could speak with them. I lied and said I had lost something valuable and wondered if the security footage might help. They hesitated, but eventually agreed to let me look. We skimmed through footage from the day I remembered. There I was, sitting with my coffee, scrolling on my phone. In the background, a man at a corner table gesturing emphatically, holding a phone to his ear. The owner said the man had left in a hurry, leaving behind a torn receipt and nothing more. I froze the frame and snapped a picture with my own phone. That image felt like a key. I did not know the man, but someone out there did. And now I had proof I had been in proximity to something. I gave the image to my friend, told them to hold on to it just in case. I still was not sure what to do next, but I had a thread to follow. The real breakthrough came when the same man appeared in a news report weeks later. He had been arrested in a financial fraud scheme involving insider trading and blackmail. I stared at the screen in disbelief. The report mentioned that confidential information had been leaked by accident and that a witness might have been present unknowingly. I was that witness. I had been near enough to be suspected of knowing something. They thought I had heard details or seen something on a phone screen. The payment had been insurance to keep me quiet, just in case. It all made sense now. The email, the fear, or the car. They were all measures to keep me silent. But it had backfired. With the man arrested, I finally felt safe. I sent the photo and all my documentation to the authorities anonymously. Look, I included a note explaining what had happened. I kept no copy for myself. It was over. Weeks passed without incident. The money remained in my account, untouched. I decided to donate it. All of it. To a legal aid group that helped whistleblowers and victims of corruption. I moved to a new apartment, changed my number, and started fresh. But I never forgot what had happened. I learned that silence could be bought, but it could also be broken. Now, when I look back, I realize I was never supposed to be involved. It was an accident, a moment of overlap in someone else's dark business. But that one moment changed everything. I chose not to be quiet. I chose to live without fear. And in doing so, I took back my own narrative. Story 12. I pushed the bar door open with no real plan for the night. I just needed a drink, something strong to dull the edge of a long and forgettable week. The place was dimly lit, crowded but not packed, music playing low beneath the chatter. I barely had time to glance around before I heard someone shout from across the room. "That's the one. Moe." The words rang through the bar like a gunshot. Conversation stopped, heads turned, and I froze in place. My first instinct was to look behind me, thinking maybe someone else had walked in. But all eyes were on me. Whoever had shouted meant me. A man near the back stood up quickly, eyes locked on mine. He looked angry, almost panicked, like he had just seen a ghost. Others around him shifted uncomfortably, watching closely but staying silent. The bartender looked confused but cautious, like he had seen worse and knew better than to jump in too soon. I took a small step forward, heart pounding, unsure what was about to happen. I raised my hand slightly and asked what was going on. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. The man pointed at me and said I had done something unforgivable. His tone was sharp but not hysterical. I had no idea what he was talking about. People started whispering, and the mood in the bar changed. Suspicion crept into their expressions, like they were trying to decide whether I was dangerous. The man insisted he recognized me from somewhere and began listing off details that made no sense. A stolen car, a woman who disappeared, a late-night incident weeks ago. None of it was familiar. I told him calmly that he was mistaken, that I had never seen him before. He refused to listen, walking closer with each word. I backed away, trying to keep distance between us. My heart felt like it was trying to break out of my chest. I could feel panic rising, but I knew I had to keep my head clear. The bartender finally intervened, stepping between us and asking the man to explain himself. He claimed he had seen my face on a blurry security video, that I matched the person involved. It was flimsy evidence, and even some of the crowd started to look doubtful. But suspicion clung to me like smoke. I could tell this wasn't going away quickly. The bartender asked me to step outside with him to talk, and I agreed. I needed air and distance. Once we were outside, I told him everything I could to prove I was not who the man thought I was. I showed him my ID, told him where I had been for the past several weeks, and even offered to call someone to vouch for me. He listened carefully and said he would call the police to help sort it out. While we waited, I paced the sidewalk, trying to make sense of what had just happened. My hands shook, and I could still hear the man's voice echoing in my head. "That's the one." The phrase replayed like a broken record. I had walked into a bar for a quiet drink, and somehow walked into the middle of someone else's nightmare. When the police arrived, I explained everything again. They were calm and professional, treating me fairly. They listened to both sides and asked the man to provide any actual evidence. He grew frustrated, unable to back up his claims beyond vague descriptions and a memory he admitted might be flawed. They took my statement and checked my information. After some time, they confirmed I had an alibi for the night in question. My workplace had records, and security footage backed up my location. The officers spoke with the man again, then approached me and apologized for their confusion. They explained he had been under stress, that his mind had likely filled in blanks with the wrong face. I should have felt immediate relief, but the unease lingered. Even after being cleared, I had been accused in front of a room full of strangers. I walked home instead of getting that drink, too shaken to relax. The city streets felt different now, every glance from a passerby a possible judgment. I was no longer invisible. The next morning, I received a call from the police. They said the man had come involuntarily to apologize and admitted he had been mistaken. They offered to let me know if he tried to contact me again. I thanked them and hung up, unsure if I believed the danger had passed. Days went by, and I kept thinking about that night. The look in his eyes, the certainty in his voice. He truly believed I was someone else. That kind of certainty scared me more than any physical threat. It reminded me how fragile our identities are, how easily they can be rewritten in the minds of others. I considered what would have happened if I had not had an alibi. What if the bartender had not stepped in? What if the crowd had believed him without question? The possibilities haunted me. It was a reminder that the truth does not always matter in the moment, only perception. Eventually, I returned to the bar. I wanted to face the place, not let it become a permanent source of fear. The bartender recognized me and offered a quiet nod of respect. A few regulars glanced my way, but quickly looked back to their drinks. The moment had passed, but its shadow remained. I sat quietly and ordered a drink, this time staying long enough to finish it. It felt like reclaiming something. I could not change what had happened, but I could refuse to be defined by it. I stayed calm, alert, and present. The man never showed up again. I heard through the police that he had moved out of the area, trying to start fresh himself. I hoped he found peace, but I also hoped he learned to be careful with accusations. A single moment of mistaken identity nearly unraveled a stranger's life. That should never be taken lightly. I learned a lot from that night. I learned that fear can come suddenly without warning and from the unlikeliest places. I learned that identity is something we must guard, not just with documents but with truth and clarity. I learned that not